How I learnt to draw backgrounds, a video for Alias, and anyone else who asks in the future.
Step 1. Lower your expectations. It was early 2020 when I first decided to try and master the background. I'd watch videos of people drawing perfect freehand perspective drawings, and when I tried to do that I failed miserably. I would show examples, but I think they've all been deleted. Over time though, I found myself getting a subconscious understanding of how perspective works and can now do, although still flawed, perspective drawings without a grid. It's still important to use the tools given to you. And so this leads us to step 2.
Step 2. Use the tools available to you. There's this magical thing called a perspective grid where you can set up a 1-point, 2-point or 3-point perspective grid and it helps like crazy. On Procreate, what I think you use, if you press the actions, canvas, drawing guide, you can set up a little perspective thingy. In the video I'm going to show you to demonstrate later on, my perspective grid will look pretty different to the one on Procreate, but I'm sure they work the same, maybe.
Although I can do some freehand drawings without the perspective grid, I still rely on it heavily because it's helpful. There's no shame in using tools, and I'm not going to put an actual ruler on the drawing tablet. I've tried, it doesn't work well. Another very helpful tool to use, references. The first perspective drawings I did were drawings of some random photos I found on Pinterest. These let me worry less about coming up with an idea and let me practice using the grid tool. To this day, when drawing perspective backgrounds, I'd say about half the time I'm basing it off a reference, as I'm not a background expert and don't know what I'm doing.
Here are some examples of the drawings I've done vs their references. You can see here there isn't much detail in the drawings compared to the references, but compared to my first perspective drawing, here, there's definitely more detail, so I guess it's just one of those things that progress as you go along.
Step 3. Doing the drawing bit, HHH God WHYME. Now that you've selected your reference, because you've selected one, threatening, it's time to look at it and match up the perspective grid to the photo as best as possible. Personally, I think this is the hardest part since Clip Studio Paint doesn't want anything to be easy. Maybe it might be better on Procreate. I like to keep my sketches simple and bare. I keep mental notes to myself to add detail with the line art later. Here's an example with the OFMD fan art.
I cheated. I got a brush and fiddled around with the settings until I was happy with the texture of the wood. Which leads to another tip: when drawing backgrounds, like trees or grass etc., use brushes. Drawing each individual leaf is for masochists.
Once the sketch is done, I'll turn off the perspective grid and do the line art freehand. This is when I would add more detail, curves, and other things to the background. Except not this time because I'm lazy and this is a tutorial. Now it's coloring time. First I do flat colors, if texture is needed, and it always is, I'll use a gouache brush and just sorta do that. How to explain it. Now it looks filthy. For more detailed textures I'll find a brush that's suitable. Now shading. This is a good time to look at the reference again, unless you want the lighting to be different to the photo. I always like to add very dramatic shading so the drawing looks more impressive than it is. If people are distracted by the pretty lights, they're less likely to look at the completely unfinished bits.
Save your progress, close the program and hope when you open it up again the next day it doesn't look like a burning pile of shit. Now you're done. Congrats.